Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mike McMahon, and I'm the Executive Director of the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada. And it's my joy today to be welcoming Bob Batastini for an interview in our series of 100 Years of Song, although Bob has not been around for all 100 years of those. He is the retired Vice President and Senior Editor of GIA Publications. He spent more than 55 years in pastoral music ministry, directing programs at several Chicago area churches. And one of the things I've always admired about Bob is he's been in the publishing business for a very long time, but he's someone whose pastoral practice has always informed the kinds of materials that he's helped us all to have access to over the years, both a pastoral musician and a publisher. I'm really, really glad to be with you today, Bob. Thanks for taking the time to talk to all of us today.
Thank you. I'm honored that you've asked me.
Well, there are a lot of wonderful people on watching, and I just want to say to all of you that we'd love to have you participate in today's session by writing your questions. You can make comments in the chat, or you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and I'll be monitoring those throughout our time together. And feel free to chime in as we go. Well, Bob, I wanted to ask you, and I'm always interested to find out, how you got into all this. How was it when you were growing up that you got interested in music and church and ministry?
Well, I attended a Catholic parochial school. Actually, I entered first grade 3 months short of my 6-year birthday. I was only 5 years old. Our school day began with daily mass every day, and the parish was staffed by the School Sisters of St. Francis, which is an order known for its musicians. Sister Theophane Heitrich was one of the best known of all of them. But we attended mass every morning, and it was a high mass, which means a sung mass. And the entire student body of 400 students sang the ordinary of the Mass, Kyrie, Gloria, Sanctus, Agnus Dei, all in Latin, of course. And I was blown away by it. I mean, I was just swept up in it. It was in a live building, good organist and we were led by the organ, and it was just overwhelmingly beautiful. By the time I was in third grade, I started piano lessons. Somewhere in there next year or two, I was in the boy choir, and then the children. In eighth grade, I started organ lessons, and freshman year in high school, I became the organist in that church. And for 3 years later, then I became the choir director too. But that's how it started, and it was the influence of those nuns that led me in that direction.
Oh, cool. So when did you start playing for church?
Well, I was a freshman in high school.
Oh,
yeah, an interesting story. I was 2 weeks into high school, 2 weeks into September, and the principal comes in and wants to see Robert Batastini. I freaked out. I mean, what did I do already? And it was the principal at the parish was calling to ask if I could play the morning masses the next day because the organist was sick. He never got well enough to play the daily masses. So for all through high school, all through college, my day began with 6:30 and 7 o'clock masses before I got on the bus. And on Saturday, and there was a nun that played the others. And on Saturday, I played all 4 masses because sister needed a rest.
Wow. Did you play and sing?
Yes. The congregation wasn't singing at that point, but the school kids did, and that was that had been an enriching experience.
How cool is that? And so then when you went off to college, did you pursue studies along those?
Well, my college education is weird. I entered DePaul University School of Music, and I by this time I had been a church organist for I don't know, eight years. So I didn't even think of church music. So I decided to be a music ed major. And after one semester, I saw that all the fun students were instrumental music ed, the ones who were studying to be band directors. So I had played trumpet and French horn in high school. So I changed my major to trumpet. And for 4 semesters, I was a trumpet major, probably the worst trumpet player that ever entered DePaul University. So in my middle of my junior year, I saw the light and I changed my major to church music, organ as my major instrument. Of course, this was during Vatican II, and the unfortunate thing is that DePaul, being a Catholic university, was oblivious to what was going on in the Vatican. So while the Vatican was churning up the liturgy and music of the church, we were still studying Gregorian chant chironomy. It's a bizarre history. The other bizarre aspect is I never sang in the college choir because they needed French horns in the band. So they gave me a dispensation from choir so I could continue to play in the band. I regret all of that now. But anyway, there you have it.
But it's interesting because I know that you gig at various times, right? I mean, you're not strictly a church musician.
No, I mean I played in a wedding band and then up until about 10 years ago I was playing in another wedding band. It was a seven-piece band and it was Elvis and I can't remember the name. But it was that 70s music and I still did that. And I still once in a while play cocktail piano for a party. And I do it for fun. I just like to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the pictures on Facebook. I know that you did. Um, just backing up a little bit, was your family at all involved in music and church music?
No, well, no, but my parents were really devout Catholics, and my mother went to mass 7 days a week. And my mother played piano by ear rather poorly. But uh, I was the youngest of three children by 10 years, and my older brother, when he said, "Aren't you going to make Bobby take piano lessons like the rest of us had to?" Because my brother and sister had taken piano lessons and both hated it and gave it up eventually. So third grade, I started piano lessons because my brother couldn't let me off the hook.
Oh, that's very funny. But it obviously took for you,
Well,
unlike.
it took. I mean, by the time I got to high school, I was playing most of the band instruments because I was one of these persons. Every time I saw an instrument, I had to crack the code, figure out how it works. I didn't play anything really well, but I was even playing saxophone in a wedding band back in my college days and high school days. But by the time I got to college, I had started a grade school band in where I was the music director in the parish. I started a grade school band, and I taught all the instruments. So it just that's my level of interest.
So did you start that right out of college, that church position?
The band, no, I started it while I was in college. I
Oh,
was a sophomore in college when I started the band in my the parish where I was the music director. I
uh,
stayed in the grade school.
so when you finished college, how did you start? What did you do?
Well, while I mean, college stretched out for 10 years for me because I changed majors twice and I gave up music ed. So all the music ed courses I had, went by the wayside. But I started at GIA while I was still in college. I
No
was
kidding.
still trying to finish, 1967. I entered college in 59 and I was dragging it on for 10 years. So I was still doing part-time college when I started at GIA. That was 1967.
Wow. Well, so talk a little bit about that, how you got started at GIA.
Well, GIA was founded by a guy named Clifford Bennett, and Clifford Bennett got to the point in 1963, I think it was, or four, where he was getting ready to retire, and he was looking to bring a young man in to take over as director of the Gregorian Institute. So he came to Chicago, and a priest friend said, you should talk to Bob Batastini. Okay. Well, he did. We talked. And, eventually he said, we decided to go another direction. So then about 3 years later, I get a phone call from a guy who says, "Hello, Bob. My name's Ed Harris, and I'm buying the Gregorian Institute, and I'm wondering if you'd be interested in coming to work for me." We met for lunch, and the rest is history. Ed has a long history in the music business because his grandfather opened the Chicago Carl Fisher store in the 1900, and then his father and uncle took over management of the store. And then Ed took over management, and when he took over management, he started doing the wholesale business for the Gregorian Institute. So Clifford Bennett called him, said, I'm going to sell the Gregorian Institute, and I think you should buy it. And Ed said, well, I know music, but I don't really know church music specifically. Well, to call Bob Battistini and talk to him. And that's how it started.
No kidding. So Clifford Bennett had remembered meeting you.
Yeah, because it was just a couple years. Yeah. Yeah. And it was Chicago. So yes. But
Uh,
40 years, 40 good years at GIA.
right. So that started in 1967, you said, right? That's
Retired in 2007.
2 years after the end of the Second Vatican Council. So there you were, right in the middle of this whole changeover in the music of the Catholic Church.
Well, the big thing was Bennett wanted to sell out because to sell the company because he just wasn't prepared in his age to make the adjustments. So yes. And I mean, but I was doing church music and I was already engaged in the post Vatican II. And I mean, I really thought Vatican II was wonderful. Everything it opened up to the church was marvelous. So that's how the connection came. And it worked out. Worked out well.
And your first hymnal was not too far behind that, right?
1971, Worship One, the original worship. It was a small little, and it basically it didn't do well. We didn't sell well, but there was enough interest. I said to Ed Harris, Ed, we need to give Catholics a good Protestant hymnal. And then came Worship Two, which is 1,000 pages with 600 hymns in it, and it sold well over 1 million copies. But
Wow.
it was the last hymnal done without attention to inclusive language. So it fit, by 11 years later, we issued Worship 3 because we had to adjust for language issues. And that one did very, very well too. And then along came Get It. All in all, I've done 24 hymnals for GIA, Protestant and Catholic.
Well, say something about that because I mean, then your influence is all over churches because of those not only those hymnals, but the relationship those hymnals have had to other hymnals, right?
Well, okay. Thank you, Hymn Society. At a Hymn Society meeting, I joined the Hymn Society in 1977, by the way. So it was no more than a year or two or three after that, I find myself hanging around with a bunch of Lutherans. We were at the having, we were having refreshments late at night. And I mean, it was Carl Schock, it was Paul Westermeyer, Gracia Grindle. There were a whole number of Lutherans, and we got to know each other, and we got and I think perhaps the first non-Catholic published musicians we published were Lutheran, John Ferguson, Carl Schock, and we started branching out more and more, and we decided early in the game that we didn't just want to be known as a publisher of Catholic music. In fact, after 40 some years, no, after 50 years now since we took over the company, we're now a full music educator. I mean, full music publisher. We publish music education materials. We publish for we bought out the Walton Public Company, which was not with choral music, high-end choral music, and so we really diversified and gone in many directions. But as far as the hymnals are concerned, I've always felt that hymnody is the language of Christian unity because of the fact, way back in my early days, if it was a Lutheran hymnal, any new hymns in that book would have come from Lutheran writers. If it was an Episcopal hymnal, even the 1982 kind of reflects this. The majority of new hymnody came from Episcopal writers. But I think thanks to the Hymn Society and the way the Hymn Society began to publish modern writers, it started with people like Schock and, Schock, of course, was a tune writer, but Yaroslav Vaida, early one was Herman Stempfli, who was a Lutheran, gradually through the many contemporary hymn writers that have affiliated with the Hymn Society, it has kind of dissolved the separations between denominations. I mean, you look in for the 500th anniversary of the Reformation. I did a hymn festival in Holland in which I took six hymn books, six different denominations, six hymn books that had been published within the last few years, and I basically went through it, showing how modern hymn writers, Mel Bringle, Ruth Duck, Dolores Duffner, um, uh, how these modern hymn writers crossed the denominational lines and appeared in all six of these hymnals. And the name of my hymn festival was Hymnody, the Voice of Christian Unity.
So just to clarify, for people who are wondering, you're talking about Holland, Michigan, right?
Holland, Michigan, yes. Holland, Michigan, yes.
Yeah.
Close to where I reside now.
Yeah, sure. So in the Hymn Society, I mean, you see how the hymn writers have influenced one another across denominational lines, from Brian Wren to, I mean, all kinds of denominational connections. Um, and at GIA, you helped to sort of popularize a lot of the work of various denominational hymn writers, yes?
Yeah, well, I always said that the hymns. I mean, I've been a champion of the Hymn Society since day one. But I always said the Hymn Society is a magnificently Christian, non-denominational organization, and nobody proselytizes. Nobody comes in to say, "Well, we Methodists do it this way," or "We Lutherans do it that way," and we can. No, basically, the Hymn Society has always been a vehicle for exchange, for sharing. People come there because they want to see what others do and how they do it, and they want to learn from it. And I think that's been the nature of the Hymn Society all along, and that's why the Hymn Society is unique, one of a kind. And I can't tell you how many church musicians I brought to the Hymn Society, just prove my enthusiasm for it.
Well, I mean, you introduced me to the Hymn Society, so I can thank you for that too. That's one of the great blessings of my life. I wonder if you'd say a bit about congregational singing, because all of this has been sort of based on the premise that congregational singing is very important. And of course, in the wake of Vatican II, with its emphasis on active participation, singing became one of the key elements in all of that.
Yes. Well, first of all, the hymn. I mean, the Catholic Church clearly says that the music of the liturgy is the song of the people. Before Vatican II, the music of the liturgy was the choir in the choir loft. But Vatican II was very, very clear about calling for the people to join actively engage in singing. I don't think it has been totally successful in my denomination. Um, Despite, I mean, you and I both served on the committee that wrote the document Sing to the Lord, which spells it out pretty well. I'm just think half of the church musicians and probably most of the clergy have never read the document. That's my assumption from the reality of it all. But Vatican II sold me. I immediately said the song of the people, hymnody, wonderful, and I was influenced by a Lutheran pastor musician who used to participate in GIA summer seminars, and by Richard Prue, who at the time was in an Episcopal church. They both influenced my concept of congregational song, and I think in 1975, when Worship 2 came out and we bought it for the church I served, from that day, I made a vow that never would we truncate a hymn. We will always sing all the stanzas of the hymn because of a respect for the integrity of the hymn. Now, in my denomination, that is still woefully wanting. So many Catholic churches today, they follow the 3-2 pattern. 3 verses, they don't even call them stanzas, 3 verses of the opening hymn, 2 verses of the closing hymn. And it totally destroys the integrity of the hymn, because a well-written hymn, and why would we want to sing anything that's not a well-written hymn? A well-written hymn, the typical pattern is to paraphrase scripture in the beginning And usually, and I even made notes here. Let me, since we're in the middle of Lent, if you don't mind me using that, I'm old and I'm forgetful, so I had to take the hymn, "The Glory of These 40 Days," since we're in the middle of Lent. "The glory of these 40 days we celebrate with songs of praise." Second stanza, "Alone and fasting Moses saw." Third stanza, "So Daniel trained his mystic sight." Biblical references. The last stanza finally says, "What does all this mean to us? Then grant us, Lord, that we may too return to fast and prayer in you." But in so many Catholic churches, they never get to the last stanza of the hymn. And the last stanza of the hymn is so often the one that says, "What does all this mean for us?" So I think in so many Catholic churches, the music is filler. It's understood as, I don't know what you call it. It's like the theme song for the 11 o'clock news. It's just background, it's music. Somebody has to do it. If it's the choir, if it's that, we didn't like the kind of we haven't reached the point yet where the song of the liturgy is universally the song of the people. Here we go. I feel like I'm on a late talk show. I even wrote a book on the subject called "The People Sing." It's only like 125 pages, but it's subtitled "A Blueprint for Establishing Vibrant Congregational Song," because I just felt the need was so strong to spell it out and go through there's like 12 chapters, and each chapter addresses another aspect of it. And unfortunately, I think it's sold 5 copies so far. No.
Well, I have
Well,
one.
I mean, okay. I mean, it's really a problem. It's really a problem in my denomination. We still don't universally understand song as universal. I mean, as essential to the rite.
Well, you're someone who not only can talk about this, but I know that you yourself have done this
I've
in
done it.
parish ministry. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about your experiences with that. Like, what difference has that emphasis on congregational singing made in the lives of those communities that you've served?
Well, I think I think it's clear. I think they understand. I'll tell you a little story about one church. I started at this church, and I directed both the traditional choir, or the formal choir, and the folk choir. And the folk choir had been autonomous. When I took the job, I said, "I want to direct that group too." And the pastor said, "Ooh, well, they may not like that." I said, "Well, I'm going to do it anyway." So, gradually I tried to introduce this concept of singing hymns that are related to the liturgy of the day. So one Sunday, with the folk choir, we had prepared Marty Haugen's "Eye has not seen, ear has not heard." Okay. Get to the epistle, and the lector gets up there and says, "Eye has not seen, nor has ear heard." And this guitar player who had been in this group for 20 years looked at me and went, "The idea that we should sing music that's," well, in that parish, I was in that parish 12 years. And I think once the folks understand that there's a relationship between the song we sing and the scriptures of the day or the liturgical season. Well, we always do it in Christmas and Easter. We sing music that's relative to the liturgical season. But do we do it the rest of the year? What about all those Sundays in ordinary time? Oh, let's see. We haven't sung "Amazing Grace" in a long time. Let's do that this week. I mean, that's the thinking in a lot of churches. But when the music clearly, what I used to do in the church, I would say, "Next Sunday," I would, before Mass, I'd get up and say, "Next Sunday, the gospel is such and such a story. So we're going to prepare this hymn to sing for the opening of next Sunday's liturgy." So we rehearse it that week. And then the next week before Mass, we rehearse it again, and then immediately becomes the opening hymn. But that was my way of introducing him. Say, because of the scriptures we're going to read next week, we want to learn this new hymn that we've never sung before. And it worked. I mean, the parishes I've served have really, I like to say my congregation sang like a church full of Methodists.
Well, the Lutherans are going to be very disappointed that you didn't talk about
Say Luther. Okay.
And there are a few on here watching, and not to mention Dave Eicher, who's was responsible for Glory to God, or partly responsible for
Well,
Glory to
Lutherans were our first branching from GIA. It was our first
God.
branching out. And, we published a book called, and I was my idea. The Lutherans weren't publishing new, and there was no new Lutheran hymnal in the word. And there was so many new hymns coming out. So we published that hymn thing called Hymnal Supplement 1991, and it was totally geared at Lutheran churches. One of the persons who bought it was Randy Sensmeyer for his church, and he was so enthusiastic about it. He came to GIA looking for a job, and he's retired now, but he spent many years at part-time at GIA as our editor for hymnody related materials, and now that job went to Adam Tice.
Well, one of the things that really struck me about what you were just saying about things you did in the parish was that you were putting scripture on the lips of the people each Sunday, and that certainly has had to have a profound impact on the way that people are receiving scripture and are being formed by scripture, and as they reflect every week and worship every week.
Well, there's a principle, and there's a principle in education I've heard, something I maybe can't quote it well, but it says you tell them and then you repeat it and then you sing it and then you repeat it again. And, it's repetition is the way we learn. So I mean, I just feel that it's critical and essential that the opening hymn of the liturgy have something to do with the message of the day. And like I say, we do it on Christmas and we do it on Easter, and maybe on Good Friday. But when you get into the Sundays in ordinary time, it's let's see, what haven't we sung in a long time? And that approach. I mean, I subbed at a church recently where the rule is two verses are, whenever Father gets to the altar, we cut the hymn, the opening hymn, and two stanzas of the closing hymn. And I just can't buy that. It just eats away at me to see that people are deprived of the ability to sink into the meaning of the hymns we sing, providing that they are well related to the service of the day.
You've had a lot of experience in working with choirs and with presiders and pastors, and I wonder if you could say something about the role of both choirs and ministers in relation to congregational singing.
Sure. Well, the choir has its own role. The choir, I've always told my choir and congregational singing, we are just part of the congregation. We are not the choir. We don't lead congregation. So I don't really rehearse the hymns, especially with unless sometimes to give the choir its role, we'll introduce a hymn. We're going to sing hymn number 472, and the third verse will be sung by the choir alone. And then the choir maybe will do an SATB a cappella verse, and then the fourth stanza, the congregation comes back. That kind of back and forth has a relationship. I think there's a place for choir music. The choir fulfills a role almost like a homilist. The readers get up and read, and then the preacher preaches about the topic of the day. And the choir, if the music is well selected, and the choir sings about the liturgy of the day, and it contributes. There's room to contribute art. But I think the choir and congregation in alternation is a great way to function. But when it comes to congregational song, I have always told even if we're doing a little Taizé piece, say as a second communion hymn, I'll say we always start in unison, because if we come out of the gate in four parts, the congregation's going to say, this is a choir piece. So we always start in unison, sing it twice in unison to get the congregation on board. Then the choir can support it with its harmonies. And sometimes we'll even leave the organ out and just let the choir lead the congregation with the four-part harmony. But I think there's certainly a role for a choir in a liturgy, but it's not the choir's job to lead congregational song, because if it was, we'd have to have a choir at every service.
Right. Well, I remember that when you and I worked on Sing to the Lord, that your view prevailed when we were talking about the role of the choir. And I think it sort of goes against the conventional wisdom, the people saying, well, the choir's there to kind of prime the pump for the congregation. It's rather the choir should regard itself as part of the congregation. I thought that was a very
Well, there's room for art. There's room for art in liturgy. There's room for art, and the choir can provide a level of musical performance that is an elevated art form, and it contributes. I've always told the choir, the choir functions like a homilist. Homilist inspires the congregation, and the choir singing should inspire the congregation, not be an intermission, but it should be an inspiration, which means what we sing makes a difference in how it relates, again, just like the hymns, how it relates to the music of the day.
yeah.
I do have a problem with the approach in the Catholic Church and other churches. I think if it's congregational song, we should not hear a person singing through the microphone, because then that becomes a sing-along. I say the congregation has to own the song. If there's a praise band and everybody in the praise band has a microphone, it's a sing-along. If they have you can be led by a folk group or a praise band. As long as nobody's singing into microphones, then the congregation is the voice. But if we're singing into microphones, who cares about the congregation? They're just sort of singing along, and that's not congregational song. I don't see it as congregational song. It's a sing-along. The congregational song has to be generated by the people, mostly led instrumentally. That's my definition.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. I wonder if we could talk about the Hymn Society again for a bit. You served as president of the Hymn Society. I mean, you've been an active member. Of course, you also got the prize a couple of years ago for the most consecutive conferences attended. I don't remember what the number was, but
44, I think.
Wow, that's amazing.
They weren't consecutive, but that was the most. I mean, I of the people who were there, I had attended the most. They weren't all consecutive because I did miss one or two.
Okay, well, this was at the 100th anniversary celebration. And at that time, I think we had only had maybe 50 conferences. So you had been at all but
Yeah, I had been to most. I started in 1977 when the big transition. Tom Smith came in. The Hymn Society made a major transition. The convention was in Chicago, so I don't know what this is. I went to it and I was blown away. Frankly, I was blown away. I don't think I missed a conference for the next 20 years. By that time, I had become president.
So say something about that. How did be serving in leadership of the Hymn Society? What did you see, and what did you guys do?
Well, I don't know what I think it was the whole concept of the Song of the People that just knocked me off my feet. And when Worship 2 came out, I was invited to do a presentation, a showcase for the hymn book. And it was oh no, I forget who was the president then. See, I'm very forgetful at my old age. The other day I forgot my wife's name. I said, give it to Marie. So, yeah, the joke about you walk into a room and you don't remember what you went there for. It's not a joke. Anyway, anyway, I was asked to serve on the committee I was asked to serve on the executive committee as a member at large, and I think I did 2 terms there. And then I was elected president-elect. And then so that was now, so my 4th term on the board, I became president. And then the 5th term was as the immediate past president.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud of some of the things we did. One of them is that while I was president, we nominated the first ever woman president of the Hymn Society, Emily Brink. And we started the past president's council, which was a sort of an advisory, meet once a year, an advisory group. I started that. But I was swept off my feet by the sound of congregational song, by hymn singing. It just absolutely swept me off my feet. And I got very, very, very much into the whole concept, and Tom Smith introduced me to Herman Stempfli, which was really well. We were in Charleston, and there was after the lunch hour, there was a half hour new hymn writer showcase, and the writer was Sylvia Dunstan.
Mm.
First one I had attend. So here's this woman who's a hymn writer, and the stuff she wrote was breathtaking. When it was over, I walked up. We were in a church. I walked up the middle aisle of the church, and George Shorney was going up the side aisle of the church, and I got to her first. For those who don't know, George Shorney was the president of Hope Publishing. So I got to her first. I said, Sylvia, do you have a publisher? She said, no. I said, do you want one? She said, yes. That was the first modern hymn writer we published. But then that led to others, and then the next really major edition was Herman Stempfli. He came to a hymn society meeting, and Tom Smith introduced me to him. And then the following year, Herman Stempfli introduced me to Sally Ann Morris. So we started publishing tunes too. But we had already published Calvin Hampton. We had been publishing Calvin Hampton's tunes. So, the interest in hymnody just goes back as far as I can remember.
Well, I won't embarrass you by asking you to name all the hymn writers that you met and sort of fostered at the Hymn Society, but I will ask you to talk a little bit about Tom Smith, because I know you had a very close relationship with him. He was the first executive director after the transition.
Tom and I became great friends. In fact, Doreen and I visited him for 10 days at his home in Mexico. As I have to say, and I'm sure I'd said the same thing about you, but as the president of the Hymn Society, he was the quiet voice over my shoulder, and he did not just for me. He did it. He played that role of just making sure everything was on board, and he would attend the executive committee meetings and only spoke if spoken to. He was there to do the job he was hired to do. And he just served as a tremendous influence to the whole operation. I mean, the Hymn Society owes so much to Tom. I was saddened at his loss in the last year, but he was he was a Lutheran musician. That's how he started. He had a little pipe organ in his living room. When he moved to Mexico, he took it. He had a little portative. But he was a very serious musician and a very serious churchman, and he really, really, really believed in congregational song. So he was a tremendous, whoever it was, and I'm not sure I remember who hired him, but whoever it was that hired him, set the Hymn Society on a totally new path.
Well, the executive committee that hired Tom really took a big risk. I mean, a big leap to make a dramatic change, really, in the life of this organization, and sort of dream big about what it could be and the kind of influence it could have. And certainly, hiring Tom was a major.
My recollection of the Hymn Society before that time was that the committee would meet and sit around a big meeting table and discuss the meaning of the Eucharistic hymns of Charles Wesley. I mean, it was an small academic group, and I didn't participate until 1977, and that's when it had turned the corner.
Tom Strickland just wrote in the comments that L. David Miller had something to do with getting Tom Smith as executive.
That's right. I recall that now. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Well, we're almost at the end of our time, and if anybody does have a question or something else that they want to contribute, please put that in the Q&A or in the chat before we wrap up. But while we do that, Bob, I wondered if you could say something about the future of the Hymn Society and what might be your fondest hope for the society going forward.
This may sound simplistic, but I would say stay the course. Stay the course. give people the experience. For a lot of musicians that have attended a hymn society conference, it may be the first time they've heard that kind of hymn singing.
Mm-hmm.
Keep people the experience of hymn festivals that are totally depending on the voice of the congregation. Keep this leader off the microphone. You don't need that. Give people that experience. That's what it did to me. It was the experience of coming in there and experiencing hymn singing like that. I said, "Oh my God, we got to make this happen in the parish." And that's what did it. I say, stay the course, keep supporting new writers, and keep doing sessions for new writers that give them feedback to help them hone their skills. Tune writers, I think that's a really good thing. It's an important function to nurture writers, hymn writers, tune writers, and to educate church musicians in the richness of really, really robust hymn singing.
Thank you. That's good counsel, and I think we're still heading in that direction. So,
Oh, I know it is. Sure.
I want to thank you for everything you've done for this society and for our field. I mean, you've made major contributions, and I am a little biased. I think I was telling Bob before our we started today that I think I've known him longer than any other person in this field, going back 50 years. So I've watched how much your contribution has made a difference. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I just stopped conducting my last choir in January, and yesterday I rejoined that choir as a member. You can't stay away from that.
Exactly. I mean that's just
you can't. It's not what you do; it's who you are.
exactly. Well, thanks again for all you do, and thanks for this time. I really enjoyed talking to you today.
And thank you for what you're doing for the Hymn Society. I couldn't be happier with you in that position, giving my history with the Hymn Society.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Thanks everybody for joining us today, and we'll look forward hopefully to seeing you next month. Take good care.
Well, I'll see you in Atlanta.
Indeed. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Come to me and never be hard.